You wouldn't believe how it all started. One simple pool in my backyard turned into the neighborhood's biggest controversy thanks to Karen, the kind of HOA member who thinks she runs the world. I had built a modest, open pool for my family, something we looked forward to all year long, especially after the long, exhausting days. It was a place of relaxation, joy, and simple fun. But for Karen, that pool wasn't just a pool. It was a public nuisance, an eyesore, and against the community standards. One afternoon, I got a letter from the HOA, signed by none other than Karen herself, demanding that I cover the pool immediately or face hefty fines. The letter read like it came from some tyrant's decree: cover the pool to prevent safety hazards and maintain neighborhood aesthetics. I was stunned. No prior warnings, no chance to discuss, just a blunt order to cover up a perfectly legal, safe pool. The shock wasn't just in the demand, but in how quickly it escalated, turning neighbors against me with whispers and sideways glances. Karen started knocking on doors, spreading rumors that my pool was dangerous and lowering property values. It felt like I was suddenly the villain in a neighborhood drama I never auditioned for. Trying to stay calm, I reached out to the HOA board to understand if this was a new rule or just Karen's personal vendetta. To my surprise, the board was hesitant but seemed reluctant to go against Karen's wishes. She had a way of influencing decisions with her aggressive tone and connections. Every conversation felt like walking on eggshells, as if I was the one who'd broken some unspoken rule no one wanted to admit existed. The tension kept building, and Karen's demands grew louder and more unreasonable. She even suggested installing cameras to monitor my pool hours and insisted on daily reports about usage. It was like living under constant surveillance in my own home. But instead of backing down, I decided to fight this nonsense. Little did Karen know, her demand would spark a battle that would turn the whole neighborhood upside down, and I was ready to take it head on. But first, I needed a plan that Karen and the HOA would never see coming, and that's when things really started to get interesting. From the moment Karen's demand landed on my doorstep, things quickly spiraled out of control, turning what should have been a peaceful neighborhood into a battleground of petty power plays and endless threats. Karen wasn't just satisfied with sending a cold letter telling me to cover the pool. Oh no, she had bigger plans to make my life miserable. Almost immediately, the HOA started sending notices demanding I comply, immediately, threatening daily fines that quickly added up to thousands of dollars if I didn't cover the pool as instructed. It felt like they were trying to break me financially before I even had a chance to argue. Every interaction with the HOA felt like walking into a trap. I was summoned to meetings where Karen took center stage, wielding her influence like a weapon. She had mastered the art of manipulation, turning minor rule violations by others into nothing but background noise while making my pool the poster child of community decay. The worst part was watching neighbors who once greeted me warmly now avoid me or whisper as I passed, their eyes filled with doubt, swayed by Karen's constant rumors about safety hazards and property value drops. Karen's control games were relentless. She tried to dictate when I could use my own backyard, suggesting hours when the pool was acceptable to be uncovered and times when it was disturbing the peace. She even pushed for installing surveillance cameras pointed directly at my property to monitor my compliance. It felt like I had become a prisoner in my own home. The HOA meetings turned into arenas of intimidation where Karen played the victim, claiming she was protecting the community from my reckless behavior. Meanwhile, I was portrayed as a defiant troublemaker willing to break rules just to spite my neighbors. I started to notice a pattern. Every time I tried to speak up or present evidence proving my pool was fully compliant with city and HOA regulations, Karen would interrupt, shout over me, or bring up unrelated grievances from years ago to discredit me. It was exhausting and infuriating, but I knew giving up would only make things worse. Despite the mounting pressure, I started gathering support quietly. I spoke to neighbors who were hesitant to confront Karen publicly but privately agreed that Her behavior was over the top. Some even shared their own stories of Karen's petty complaints that had nothing to do with community welfare, but more with her need for control. This was no longer about a pool. It was about Karen's thirst for power and control over everyone's lives. The HOA board was stuck between Karen's relentless push and their desire to avoid conflict, often siding with Karen just to keep the peace. But I refused to back down. I documented every threat, every unfair notice, and every meeting where Karen tried to bully me. I knew I needed to expose the truth, not just for myself, but for anyone else who might fall victim to this kind of tyranny. Just as I thought things couldn't get worse, Karen escalated to legal threats, saying she would sue me if I didn't comply immediately. It was a full-scale war, but I was ready to fight. Little did she know, I had started planning a response. That would turn the tables, and it all began with a bold idea that no one saw coming. By the time I decided to take matters into my own hands with what I called the hot tub master plan, the tension with Karen and the HOA had reached a boiling point. I wasn't going to just sit back and let them dictate what I could or couldn't do with my own backyard. Karen's threats and the endless meetings had drained me, but I knew I had to come up with something clever, something that would not only shut down her ridiculous demands, but also give me the upper hand in this power struggle. The idea hit me one night while I was scrolling through online forums, reading stories about neighbors who found creative ways to fight back against overbearing HOAs. That's when it clicked. If they wanted my pool covered, why not build something that complied with the rules but gave me even more? A hot tub. Not just any hot tub, but a custom-built, state-of-the-art hot tub that would fit perfectly in my backyard, blending in with the landscaping and looking so polished that even the strictest HOA couldn't argue against it. I started researching everything: permits, designs, installation costs, maintenance, even how it would affect property value. I wasn't about to take a half-hearted approach. This plan had to be foolproof. The best part? The HOA had no rules about hot tubs. Apparently, they considered pools and hot tubs differently, so if I could build this, I could enjoy my backyard fully without breaking any rules Karen was trying to enforce. Next came the challenge of executing the plan without Karen catching wind of it too soon. I had to be discreet, hiring contractors who could work quickly and efficiently, keeping the project under wraps. It was like staging a secret mission in my own home. Meanwhile, Karen kept pushing harder, sending emails and threats, convinced that I'd cave any day. Little did she know, while she was busy playing control games, I was turning the tables. With my hot tub strategy, the installation process itself was a whirlwind. I faced setbacks, delays in permits, tricky plumbing issues, even a minor electrical hiccup, but each obstacle only made me more determined. I could almost picture Karen's face when she finally saw what I'd done. I spent nights planning the perfect reveal, imagining how the community would react when they saw my new hot tub, sleek and stylish, fully compliant and impossible to complain about. And then the day came. The hot tub was finished, bubbling and steaming under the moonlight, a perfect little oasis that transformed my backyard. I invited a few neighbors over to celebrate quietly, sharing laughs and enjoying the moment. But the best part was what happened next at the HOA meeting. Karen stormed in, her expression twisted in disbelief and fury when she saw my backyard. She had no words at first, just sputtering about rules and unfairness, but I calmly reminded everyone that the hot tub was fully within regulations. I could see the realization dawn on the other board members' faces. They couldn't argue with facts or my careful planning. Karen's power grip began to slip as more neighbors voiced their support for me, praising my clever solution and calling out the HOA's obsession with petty rules. The meeting turned into a turning point. I had not only defended my right to enjoy my property, but it also exposed how Karen's control games were overstepping boundaries. This victory was just the beginning, and it was satisfying to know that sometimes the best way to fight back is with a smart plan that leaves your opponents speechless. But Karen wasn't ready to give up just yet, and the next chapter of this Story was about to unfold with surprises that no one expected. When the day of the big reveal finally arrived, I was a mixture of excitement and nerves, knowing full well that Karen's reaction would be priceless, if not downright explosive. I had spent weeks meticulously planning every detail to make sure nothing could be used against me, and now, standing in my backyard with the hot tub glistening under the afternoon sun, I felt a sense of quiet victory. Word had already started to spread around the neighborhood, and a few curious neighbors came by to check out the transformation, whispering among themselves how impressive the setup looked. I knew Karen wouldn't be able to hold her composure when she saw what I had done, but I was ready for whatever drama she was about to unleash. As expected, the moment Karen stepped onto my property, her face twisted with disbelief and fury, the kind of look that made it clear she had been completely blindsided. She immediately launched into a tirade, spitting out accusations about breaking HOA rules and trying to intimidate me with the usual threats of fines and penalties. But this time, I was prepared, with facts, paperwork, and a solid legal footing. I calmly showed her the permits, the HOA guidelines that explicitly allowed hot tubs, and even letters from contractors who had confirmed everything was up to code. The crowd that had gathered started to murmur, sensing that Karen's usual tactics were falling flat. Her voice got louder, more frantic, as she realized that her control over the neighborhood was slipping. She started accusing me of sabotage, of bending rules unfairly, but the neighbors who had previously complained about her heavy-handedness began to speak up in my defense. What followed was a meltdown for the ages. Karen's composure shattered completely, her shouting escalating into incoherent rants that only made her look worse. Some board members exchanged uneasy glances, clearly uncomfortable with how far she was taking this. I could almost feel the shift in power happening right there in my backyard. The very thing Karen had tried so hard to suppress, my right to enjoy my property, had now become a symbol of resistance for others fed up with her overreach. The neighborhood was rallying around me, and Karen's desperation was palpable. She started throwing out wild threats about legal action, but no one seemed to be buying it anymore. I could see some neighbors shaking their heads, fed up with the drama and ready for a more reasonable community dynamic. Watching Karen lose it was strangely satisfying, but also a reminder of how toxic HOA politics could get when one person tries to wield too much power. As the meltdown continued, I realized this wasn't just about a hot tub anymore. It was about standing up against bullying and showing that with knowledge and determination, you could push back. I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken acknowledgement that things had changed. Karen's reign was weakening, and a new chapter was beginning, one where residents might finally have a voice. But of course, Karen's meltdown wasn't the end of the story. There were repercussions and responses to come, and I was ready to face them head-on. The entire experience had taught me the power of staying calm, being prepared, and turning the tables on those who think they can control everyone else. The big reveal had become more than just a backyard upgrade. It was a turning point in the ongoing battle for fairness and respect in our community, and I couldn't wait to see what would happen next. But little did I know, Karen's next move would push the drama even further, and the neighborhood would be watching closely to see how it all played out. The day of the HOA meeting had finally arrived, and the tension in the air was thicker than ever. Everyone knew Karen was going to try her hardest to regain control, to intimidate anyone who dared to stand against her. I showed up early, armed not just with my own story but with the support of neighbors who had grown tired of her endless power plays. The room was packed, whispers bouncing off the walls as people exchanged glances and braced themselves for what was about to unfold. Karen arrived fashionably late, as always, her expression a mix of smug confidence and barely concealed anger. She wasted no time launching into a tirade, accusing me of violating community rules and trying to manipulate others to turn against the HOA board. But this time, the dynamic had shifted. I calmly responded, laying out the facts, how every step I had taken was within the guidelines, how the permits were approved, and how many neighbors supported my efforts to stand up for our rights. The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement, and some of Karen's usual allies looked uncomfortable, unable to defend her anymore. What really sealed the deal was when a longtime resident, someone who had stayed silent for years, stood up and shared their own story of being bullied by Karen. The courage in their voice was contagious, inspiring others to speak up. It quickly turned into a chorus of voices calling for change, for fairness, for an HOA that worked for everyone, not just Karen's agenda. Karen's face flushed red. Her attempts to interrupt were drowned out by the wave of support behind me. The board was forced to acknowledge that the community had had enough, and they reluctantly agreed to review the policies and Karen's overreach. It was a moment of sweet, satisfying karma, seeing the woman who had tried to control everything finally face the consequences of her actions. The meeting ended with applause and a newfound sense of hope for the neighborhood. As people filed out, neighbors came up to thank me, sharing how my stand had given them courage to speak up too. That night, as I sat reflecting on everything, I realized this was more than just a win for me. It was a win for all of us who had ever felt powerless against unjust rules and entitled bullies. So if you enjoyed hearing about how standing up to a Karen at an HOA meeting changed everything, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Because here, we share real stories of everyday people fighting back and winning. And, trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Together, we're building a community where everyone's voice matters and every story counts. Stay tuned for more wild, unbelievable, and downright satisfying tales right here.